Hello and welcome to the game analysis that was requested by the opponent of the simul game that are conducted in the simul. So this game was played today, April 25th, 2024, a Thursday, and what was played by my friend James Hiltoon, one of the best chess players in my local club, and he played against Imani Adamson. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, but this is the game that I'm looking at this from James' perspective, and I'll show you the other way around and show you the analysis that I ran about this game. What were the benefits for each side? So e4, c6, that Caro-Kann defense, d4, d5, and James decided to play the move that I used to play all the time when I started playing rated chess, which is the exchange variation e takes d5. So after c takes d5, James played this normal theory, bishop b3, and the plans are like this. Bishop f4, knight goes out of the way and castles kingside, maybe c3 if they go knight c6, but this is all standard, so James Hiltoon knows what he's doing. So after knight c6, c3 happens to defend the d4 pawn, so now after this knight c6, and now bishop f4. Bishop g4, queen b3, all standard theory, queen c8, knight d2, and now knight h5 was a dubious mark because usually in chess, knights are the rim, or it's basically considered dim or grim. Knights don't belong on the edge of the board because this is a one move threat. The bishop goes back and you have to move back, and now it's white's turn. So basically, if you think about it, you're saying pass, your turn again, white. It's not how you play chess. You want to have moves with a purpose. Maybe e6 was better as a move for black, developing the pieces. Maybe something like bishop e7 and just castle. These are proper ways to play as black. And not in h5, just have one move threat. Don't play one move threats, have intentions that are behind them. So knight h5, and now James played this knight gf3. Why is it considered dubious? Because, well, chess.com's engine considers that this is dubious because white had better options. So the better options was probably h3. Probably I'd say because it's also playable to do knight gf3, but this is opinion by the computer engine. So this one takes in g6, take there, and then g5 to ram this knight away from f6. So this is what the engine wanted to do, but didn't basically necessarily say that this is knight gf3 is bad, but this is a slightly better version of things, but white is still good nonetheless. So let's go back. So James played knight gf3, and now e6 was proper, and after the castles, bishop e6 is ideal, best move for the black pieces. So now, because it's looking at h2, patrolling this queenside, is actually in the wedge of this kingside, queenside, let's say, scope. So after this one, h3, h5, what is called the fishing pole trap. So usually, this is really important to know, the fishing pole traps only works if the queen can able to access the mating square in h2, or the square that is exposed, the open h file. So the queen is not actually looking at the square, it's actually behind the pawn, behind the bishop, behind everything. So the ability to checkmate white with a fishing pole trap is not really conditionally matched. So this h5 move is actually a blunder, and that is really not proper use to do a fishing pole trap. So now, I know the h5 looks cool, but if the conditions are not met, in these conditions, white is actually winning and black is losing. So James knew that this is not proper. Taking a g4. Taking a g4, knight e5. He says, I'm up a piece, why don't I trade? So when you're up a piece, you want to trade down, and it makes it easier for you to finish the game. So they take back, and then after they take the two pawns for the, let's say, the bishop, now we go, well, basically James made an oopsie because this is really not good for white. Better was g3, king h2, g2 rather, and rook h1 to trade off the rooks. So this is not acceptable to have the dark squares be so fragile with f4. So f4 was not good from James. So after the en passant, which is a really cool, nifty thing that black can do, the knight takes f3, bishop e3. This is a really annoying wedge that black has constructed. So the king will be a little bit vulnerable looking. So now, after queen b5 check, we, as James, forces off a trade of queens. And it says it makes it easier, but they have to execute it properly. So they have the bishop pair, they have the extra bishop, and let's see how the game continues. So this one, we have this one, and after king g8, white goes back and say, I want to trade again. And this black was wise to say, not so fast. I don't want to have it be too easy for you. So he goes back, and Mani knew what he was doing. He says, I don't want to trade this anymore. So this one, g3. Finally, James knew that this had to be done. Maybe should have done it earlier, but basically, if it's better late than never, is a really good saying for this game. So this one, e5, tries to do this threat of e4, winning a piece by the fork. So James knew is coming, bishop e2, e4, knight d4, hopping in the outpost square. This is an outpost square because there's no way a pawn will attack this knight on d4, so it's ideally placed. So now e3, little nifty move, but this trading again. You see, this is really looks attractive for black, but it's trading down when they're already down, so it's not really ideal. So bishop f4 saying from James, I want to trade again. You can't just run anymore, but well, knight e4 comes in and is a really good move by Amani, saying that if you take my bishop, I'll just have your knight be in your face. And this is a really tricky position, but he took the knight, well, the bishop rather. So after knight takes there, rook e1, saying that, okay, you check on h1, then I'll do king g2, and I'll be fine to trade more, and it'll be good for white. So instead, what happened is white did rook e8, and if this one king g2 is planned, so king g2 happened, and now knight e4 back to where it was ideally placed. So knight d4 is not an outpost, but also knight e4 is not an outpost. So we want to just hold line and make sure that we have progress as black. But white has to do some improving. So white decides to trade off a set of rooks. So they trade off a set of rooks, and at g6 you want to just actually have the king be attacking piece. So in the endgame, the king is an attacking piece. So why not have it be active? So bishop f3, f5, really looking down this, let's say, this, you could take on e4, but now I still have the same grip on the center. So two center pawns now instead of one. How about that? So James says, I want to just pin this knight because if the knight moves, I'll take your rook on e8. So that'll be not good for black. So he did, Amani did king g7 to move the king. So this one, c4 was a blunder. c4 was a blunder because if you think about it, if you had a chance to go back again, you had to pick a target. This is a big target. d5 pawn is a weak target because if you think about it, white has an easy plan to win the pawn alright. So the plan is to go bishop d1. And just remember, this knight is pinned. So knight is pinned, so after bishop e1, they can do something. Let's say king goes up again, but bishop b3. So then rook d8, then rook d1, and basically the alignment of the rook and the pawn will be actually decisive, and it'll be able to win this outright for free. So there's nothing that black can do to save the pawn in this case. So this is why white has such a big advantage. So when you're converting, trade down, and also pick a target, take that target, and make it easier. So d5 was a really blatant target that James did not see. Instead, he wanted to trade down pawns. But one thing is important to know for yourself to keep in mind. if you're losing, black is losing, they want to trade pawns. If all the pawns are gone, then it'll be easier to draw. So if you're down, you want to trade pawns. If you're ahead, you want to trade off pieces. You want to have a knight for a knight, or a bishop for a knight, and a rook for a rook. The knight and king for 3 pawns. And basically, if you imagine this, all the pieces are off the board. We have a king and knight, an ideal square versus the 5 pawns. And we have 3 connected pass pawns. The queen side of the majority. Then white will be easily able to convert this to win. So this is a really good lesson that James did not keep in mind. He played c4 and helping black's strong chances to become alive. So after there, take the, let's say, take the bishop, knight takes rook. But the thing is, there's a cool thing that Amani missed. This is actually good for white to have this rook takes the bishop, because it follows the principles. If you just trade the rooks off like you did in the game, then white has a way to patrol the game, easily able to convert. So, but what should have done else? There's actually a fact that there's a pin. There's a pin on the bishop. They don't have to take the bishop now. They don't have to take this one now. They do king f6. And then when the moment's right, they can go take on e4. They can just support the g5 pawn, push. And actually, there's a really good, better version that'll be really dead draw. So instead, the game went this way. They trade off everything. And at this one, knight g3, the king g3 was a bad move. They had a missed opportunity to run this king actually to the right squares. This one, target this guy. Pick a target. Just aim for the target. If you win the target, it'll be easier to convert the win. So there's no way to defend the pawn now. Knight e2, knight e3, take the pawn on e4. The pawn's lost is dead in the water. The king will be able to patrol taking the king side, the queen side pawns rather, and the game is over. But instead, James mistakenly played king g3. Now this is not really winning for white. It's the draw, because g5 was a really good find by Amani. The best moves on the board is great. So after king g4, king f6. And he wants to strive to take this knight away. And the queen side pawns are the actions. So he knows, Amani knows, he wants to take those pawns on a2, b2 off the charts. So if the pawns are not a factor, it'll be a draw at the very least. So knight f5, king e5, ideal. Takes the pawn, doesn't matter, e3. You want to open up, sack the pawn, but now the king goes where he wants to go, to this d3, to c2, to b2, to a2. It'll be draw. So this one, c3. Again, this is a really good decision by Amani to trade a pawn. So there's no other choice. The best move is take the pawn, and now king moves in, but now the pawn moves in. Doesn't matter if it's dubious. Basically, the point is it's drawn. So this one, there, trade off the pawns, and the game is over. It's draw. So Amani played really well against one of the best players in my chess club, and hopefully this analysis was helpful. The things to remember of this game is that knights on the rim are dim. The fishing pole trap does not work if the queen does not help with the main square on h2. And the last thing is that if you are down material, you probably know this in the seed of the game. If you're down material, you want to trade off pawns. And if you're ahead of material, don't be like James. You trade off pieces and not pawns. Save your pawns in the future and don't trade them off. So hopefully this analysis is good, and hopefully I'll see you next time all. Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.